What is going on, everybody? It is your boy, Dennis Squids. And as everybody knows, I'm a Crash Bandicoot fan. Doesn't take a genius to figure out. Go on my channel and look at the abundance of Bandicoot related content. And that being said, I probably overestimated my knowledge of the Crash Bandicoot universe because I came across a fact the other day that kind of blew my mind. So I think we all know, if we're fans of Crash, there are some Crash games that never saw the light of day. They were cancelled for miscellaneous reasons, but the actual number of games that have been cancelled since the franchise's inception is actually mind-blowing. How many do you think? 3, 4, maybe 5? Well, the truth is, over 10 Crash Bandicoot games have never seen the light of day. So today I thought it would be interesting to dive into some of the more prominent titles that were never released. We'll explore some of the interesting concepts that were pitched, how far along these games got in the development process, and ultimately the reason for their cancellation. And I will warn you, some of these Crash Bandicoot game concepts are incredible. So you're probably gonna get mad FOMO, but you have been warned. Without further ado, let's get started with the first Crash Bandicoot game that was cancelled on our list, and that is Crash Bandicoot Evolution. Now, Crash Bandicoot Evolution was to be developed by Traveller'sTales Oxford Studios, and it was intended to be a large-scale adventure game that combined platforming with RPG elements. The plot involved the evil twins stealing Crash's island and using it as a piece in a larger puzzle made from fragments of different worlds. The game would have introduced new characters as well, such as Foofy, an animal that could transform into different shapes, and it would have had a more serious tone compared to the usual Crash games. It was set in sci-fi environments with intricate locations and alien races. Development began after the release of The Wrath of Cortex in 2001, with the team working on it up until 2003. They created concept art, storylines, and early prototypes, with some of the ideas and assets like the evil twins and the concept of Crash teaming up with Cortex ultimately being repurposed for Crash Twinsanity. Crash Evolutions was ultimately cancelled because it shared too many similarities with Ratchet & Clank, which came out in 2002. Ratchet & Clank also featured sci-fi settings and planets made from fragments of other worlds. And the team felt the concepts were too close, and development shifted to Crash Twinsanity, which retained some of Evolution's ideas but adopted a more comedic tone. And while we're on the topic of Twinsanity, many people always wondered, why didn't Crash Twinsanity get a sequel? I mean, it was a standout title in its own right, and although it didn't initially achieve commercial success, its open world gameplay mechanics and comedic elements took the franchise in a bold new direction. So, immediately following the release of Twinsanity, Traveller'sTales had plenty of ideas for follow-ups, including a proper sequel which they would have called Crash Twinsanity 2. In an interview with the developer Keith Webb in 2012 for Crash Mania, it was revealed that the sequel was planned to push the boundaries even further than its predecessor. The concept was fresh and unique, with Crash getting trapped inside a TV. From there, the game would have featured multiple levels, each based on different TV show tropes and genres. Keith Webb went on to explain that the concept started with Cortex arriving at Crash's home and giving him a TV and remote control as a gift. When Crash switched it on, he would have been sucked into the television, and the game would have unfolded through these various TV show inspired worlds. The game would have taken Crash to a Wild West show, a black and white cartoon world, a cooking show hosted by none other than Rusty Walrus, and even a medical drama themed level. And I think that's a really fun and creative idea. And despite the excitement and creative potential, the concept never came to life. Universal ultimately rejected the idea, along with many other related projects, leaving Crash Twinsanity 2 to remain just a collection of interesting concepts and ideas that fans can only imagine. And I think it's a real missed opportunity. This idea has some real substance to it. I think it would have been extremely fun to play, blending humor, creativity, and that unique charm that made the original Twinsanity so memorable. And continuing on the Twinsanity theme, so Traveller'sTales actually began working on another sequel to Twinsanity that wasn't Twinsanity 2. And it's a bit of a tongue twister, but they were going to call it Crash Clash Racing. This game was going to take a very unexpected direction. Despite being a racing spin-off, the plot would have served as a direct follow-up to Twinsanity. This was not the kind of sequel you'd expect from a racing game, and it had fans intrigued. The game was first revealed by developers Paul Gardner and Keith Webb during a 2012 Crash Mania interview, where they shared the only known piece of concept art from the game, and that was an image of evil Crash behind the wheel of a spooky customized car. This gave us a glimpse into what could have been a racing game that continued the narrative of Twinsanity in a very unique way. The most interesting concept of Crash Clash Racing was the fusion of vehicles. In the game, characters' vehicles would be able to merge with each other, adding a layer of strategy and chaos to the gameplay. Sound familiar? Well, we'll get to that in a second. What's even more intriguing is the plot. Crash Clash Racing was going to be set inside of Crash's brain. The game would feature tracks based on Crash's dreams and memories. You can imagine racing through surreal, dreamlike landscapes with levels reflecting the chaos of Crash's subconscious. A strange and creative environment for a racing game. Unfortunately, Vivendi Universal decided to hand over the development to Radical Entertainment for reasons that remain unclear. While the Crash Clash Racing idea was left behind, much of the concept was repurposed into Crash Tag Team Racing, which released in 2005. Radical Entertainment ended up taking the basic premise and turning it into a different type of racing game with an emphasis on the vehicle fusion idea, but the narrative elements from Twinsanity didn't make it to the final product. Up next on our list is a game that almost came to life but never quite made it, and it's one that sounds so cool, and that is Cortex Chaos. Cortex Chaos, also known as the all-new Cortex show, was an ambitious yet ultimately cancelled Crash Bandicoot spin-off centered on the series' main antagonist, Dr. Neo Cortex. The project was in development by Traveller'sTales before it got the scrap. The game was conceived as a way to capitalize on the comedic and entertaining character of Dr. Neo Cortex, who'd proven to be a fan favorite due to his humorous antics and villainous charm. The project was originally pitched with a series of innovative ideas, some of which would have brought fresh gameplay mechanics to the Crash Bandicoot universe. One of the earliest concepts was titled Clones of Cortex, where Dr. Cortex created mini clones of himself called duplets to aid in his evil plans. Players would guide these quirky clones through challenges, utilizing their unique abilities. The gameplay focused on teamwork between Cortex and his niece Nina, unlocking new mechanics as they worked together to control the clones. Another concept, Trials of Cortex, would have put Dr. Cortex on trial by the other villains, revisiting levels from past Crash games as interactive flashbacks. New villains like Dr. Entombed, a mummy-like pharaoh, and Dr. Entangle, who was potentially going to be a plant-themed villain, were introduced in this trial-based narrative. A third idea was a Zelda-like game where Cortex and Nina explored his lab, solving puzzles and battling with melee weapons. Players could alternate between the characters with co-op play as a possibility. Despite these intriguing concepts, the project was never given the green light for full development. Although Twinsanity has now developed a cult-like following, at the time that it was released, it received a bit of a lukewarm reception, with sales paling in comparison to the original trilogy. This ultimately resulted in Vivendi Universal putting Cortex Chaos on the back burner as they didn't want to take the risk. By the time the game was considered again, it had already been overtaken by other priorities, and the idea was ultimately discarded. Which brings us to Crash Landed. And this is the cancelled reboot that could have potentially revived Crash Bandicoot. After the mixed reception of Crash of the Titans and Crash Mind Over Mutant in the late 2000s, Radical Entertainment set out to create a brand new Crash Bandicoot title. Crash Landed aimed to rejuvenate the franchise, and it was intended to take full advantage of the next-gen HD consoles of the time, namely the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. The game was also slated to have a Nintendo DS version with Renegade Kid considered for development, and there were plans for a racing spin-off, Crash Team Racing 2010, which would have featured the same art style and characters as Crash Landed, but we'll talk about that in a second. During the 2 years of Crash Landed's development, Activision acquired Sierra Entertainment, resulting in significant layoffs at Radical Entertainment. This led to the game's cancellation, frustrating fans as concept art, screenshots, and demos leaked online in the years that followed. In terms of the story, Crash Landed would have reintroduced Crash Bandicoot's origins, focusing on his creation by Dr. Neo Cortex and his mission to rescue other defenseless Bandicoots, referred to as Bandicoots by the development team. The main antagonist would have been Dingodile, and an unfinished cutscene revealed Dingodile firing Bandicoots out of a cannon, somebody called Peter. As for gameplay mechanics, Crash Landed would have introduced some unique elements, such as the invention system, which would have allowed players to collect and combine items to create wacky gadgets, like the Frog Zuka. In line with Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant titles, the game would feature a health bar for Crash. When low on health, Crash would lose his pants, running around in his underwear until he could recover. I'll leave that one with you. The game would have also incorporated a semi-open world structure where players could explore different islands, including Black Rock Island, Crocodile Island, a desert island, and a laboratory. Each island would have had its own distinct environment and challenges. The levels would have featured dynamic elements like day-night cycles and weather effects. Although the game never saw the light of day, the wealth of leaked content, including concept art and a demo for the Nintendo DS, showcased the game's potential to have revived the franchise in a meaningful way. Up next is Crash Team Racing 2010. So CTR 2010 was a cancelled kart racing game developed by High Impact Games, which was a studio that was formed by the the former employees of Naughty Dog and Insomniac Games. For those who don't know, Naughty Dog created Crash Bandicoot and Insomniac Games created Spyro the Dragon. The game was conceived as a sister title to Crash Landed and was set to release on PS3, Xbox 360 and Wii. The game was designed with a cel-shaded, cartoonish art style similar to Crash Landed. It was to feature a high-octane racing gameplay with customizable vehicles, including 12 different mod types, offering over 60 combinations that would affect the kart's performance and allow access to alternate routes. Players could also perform stunts mid-race for speed boosts and use items such as turbo boosts, TNT, Firefly bottles, and more. Playable characters would have included Crash, Dingodile, Polar, and a new character called Landshark. Each one had unique special abilities like Crash's Tornado Spin or Dingodile's Flamethrower. The game was also set to include a variety of new tracks, with Happy Woods being the only completed one before cancellation. The track was filled with dynamic elements like high ledges, moving lifts, and environmental hazards, including a giant whale that could flatten races. Won't somebody please call Peter? While Crash Team Racing was shown off at E3 with gameplay footage and screenshots, it was cancelled in early 2010 after Activision acquired the rights to the Crash Bandicoot franchise. The project was subsequently reworked into DreamWorks Superstar Karts, though an anonymous developer later revealed that the Crash Kart Racer was much more ambitious than the retooled game. And I think it's a shame because some of the features and gameplay mechanics that were conceptualized were ahead of their time. I mean, this was supposed to come out in 2010. I think this game really had potential. Finally, we move to the last game on our list, and perhaps the one that I am the most sour about, and that's Crash Bandicoot 5. After the critical and commercial success of Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, developer Toys for Bob quickly shifted their focus to two new projects: a multiplayer game, Crash Team Rumble, and a direct sequel to Crash 4, tentatively titled Crash Bandicoot 5. However, despite the success of its predecessor, Crash 5 was ultimately cancelled, and its potential remains a heartbreaking what if. The game's concepts drew heavy inspiration from Crash Twinsanity, with the main setting being Madame Amberly's Academy of Evil. In a unique twist, Crash would explore the minds of iconic villains like Dr. Cortex, Engine, and Tiny Tiger, discovering their origins through creative and imaginative levels. And here's the real spicy part. Crash 5 was to feature a much anticipated crossover with Spyro the Dragon. The plot involved Uka Uka using a device to travel to Spyro's dimension, where he would possess the Dragon Elders. Fans have long desired a crossover between the two franchises, and this idea seemed to be the perfect way to merge them in a platforming adventure. And as a fan of both iconic franchises, it seemed too good to be true. And alas, it was. Despite Crash 4 being financially successful, crossing 5 million units sold, Activision deemed the sales underwhelming, and coupled with their increasing focus on live service games, ultimately cancelled Crash 5. Toys for Bob, now forced to shift focus, was tasked with supporting live service titles such as Overwatch 2 and Call of Duty Warzone. This left Crash Team Rumble as the only project to carry the Crash name forward, repurposing assets from Crash 4. While Crash 5 never made it past the concept stage, the details that surfaced, including story drafts and concept art, painted a picture of what could have been an ambitious and beloved sequel. The game was set to revisit familiar locales, introduce returning villains like Embryo, and offer players the chance to delve into the minds of the series' most iconic antagonists. And though the Crash and Spyro crossover never came to life, the game's cancellation marks a lost opportunity for two of gaming's most beloved franchises to finally unite. But what do you think? Do you think we'll ever get a Spyro Crash crossover game? And out of the cancelled games that I've mentioned, which one would you most like to see taken to production? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's dive into some of the cancelled Crash Bandicoot titles, and if I've left you with that perfect combination of nostalgia and heartbreak, then I've done my job. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. I'm Dan Squids, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.